So thank you so much. Thanks, Aditya, for the introduction. Very kind of you. Very, very glad to be on this forum and speaking to this audience. And, I would put this time to good use in being able to convey a wealth manager's side of how we should look at AIF as a tool in creating sustainable high delivery portfolio for our customers. So, I'll take you through some part of how AIFs came into being, and we'll take it up from there. So, a very quick introduction to what AIF is, although I'm very sure the audience here knows well. But just to set good order, it's basically privately pooling, of investments under a vehicle, where most of the investors come together with a common investment outlook. uh, the way AIFs are structured in our country, any company, corporate body, trust, or limited liability partnership can, avail the AIF license. And it is basically regulated under the AIF regulation of 2012. So, the mutual fund order of SEBI or, collective investment regulation of 99 does not cover this. There is a separate act which basically governs how an AIF must operate. Um, Very few exemptions are given, and these include, family trusts, employee welfare trusts, gratuity trusts, and holding companies, which do not require the licensing of AIF. Otherwise, to run portfolios in pooled format, you require to avail either the AIF license or any product which you deem relevant to run your vehicle. So, in simple terms, it is basically a pool of investors who come together with a common objective to invest in various asset classes. So, the good part about AIF is it could be anything. It could be stocks, it could be debt, it could be private equity, venture capital, real estate, any asset class that you feel you want to participate in, and there is a AIF registered and providing that service, you can participate in it. As of today, more than 550 AIFs are registered with SEBI, and this number is growing bigger each day. It will help to just cover this roadmap of development of AIFs, how they came about. It sets a good order on, what are the events, what are the investor inputs that led to creation of AIF. So from 1996, where the VCF regulations came in, it led to a concept paper which was proposed in 2011. And subsequently in 2012, the AIF regulation took shape. Now, the AIF regulation basically encompassed all the entire process on which AIFs are built, the entire journey of investments and regulations therein. These rules were extended to basically include angel investment, private equity, and down the line in 2014, uh, some very material changes were made to the AIF structure, which were pro-investor, which said that the AIF needs to seek an approval from at least 75% of the investors for bringing about any material change. Material change includes, change in ownership of the AIF vehicle, if the company changes, or changes in charging structure, or changes in lock-in period. Any material change to the AIF has to be implemented only post 75% of the investors approving the same. So, SEBI kept on realizing the way they will protect the investors' interest, and they kept bringing in those changes regularly. In 2015, the FDI route, automatic route was opened up. So, 100% FDI in AIF structure. In 2016, some rules were relaxed for angel investments. So the reason why it was done, angel investment funds used to be very small in size, considering small tranches of investments in new opportunities. Hence, the value of investment was brought down from 50 lakhs to 25 lakhs. That was one major change for broader participation. And the second ruling that came in was from 49 investors previously allowed. The number of investors in a angel AIF were brought up to 200. Now, this number for any regular AIF apart from angel funds is 1,000 investors. Now, in 2017, CAT3 AIF were permitted to invest in commodity derivatives. So, started the journey of AIFs in commodity space also. And the online registration platform for AIF was introduced. In 2018, guidelines were issued for AIF and IFSC. So, Gift City is one such IFSC, which can now, avail benefit of registering AIFs and fund managers and overseas companies. Brings in a lot of SOPs when it comes to taxation, procedure, pricing, all of that, and of course, infrastructure. Uh, Now, in 2020-21, SEBI has brought in a mandate, which basically now asks AIFs to benchmark themselves. Up until now, there was no benchmark available. There still isn't. They will have to come up with one. But SEBI has already initiated this to be done. A very good move, very welcome move for investors, because it is going to bring in, a lot of, what do you say, structural growth to this segment. When investors see returns benchmark to what the industry makes or what similar fund managers are doing, they will actually have better grasp and hold on how their investments are doing. And of course, the rationalization of this requirement means that every quarter they have to report the performances to SEBI. Um, Taking you through, a quick structure on AIFs. They are categorized into three broad categories: 1, 2, and 3. This is chosen at the time of registration. A lot is to do with the underlying investment. So category 1 typically is, an early startup venture capital or a social venture kind of a fund. Invest in socially economically desirable areas, so infrastructure, SME funding, all of those come under the category 1. Category 2 basically looks at private equity, debt, real estate. This is also the biggest category of AIFs today in the country, AUM wise, commitment AUM wise. And there is category 3, which looks at, in equities, pipe, hedge funds, all of those. Now, the basic difference in this categorization is, number one, taxation. So while category 1 and category 2 are pass through, which means the tax implication is in the hand of the investors. There is no entity level tax on the AIF. Category 3, however, pays the taxation at entity level, at the AIF level. The taxation here depends on the underlying security, underlying investment. So the rules governing that particular security would be the guiding factors for taxation. So example, for equity, it will be, long term at long term at 10, short term at 15. For debt, it'll be 30 plus plus, and or 20% post indexation after 3 years, so on and so forth. So what matters is, what does the AIF fund invest in? Now, some of the features that you will see, basically all AIFs in Cat 1 and Cat 2 are closed ended with minimum 3 years of tenure. Leverage is strictly not allowed in both Cat 1 and Cat 2. In Cat 2, leverage to operate on a daily basis is the only permissible quantum. Otherwise, no leverage on the portfolio for investment is allowed. The maximum cap for single portfolio entity is high at 25%, which proves to be a very important factor when it comes to investing in AIFs, which I will discuss a little later. Category 3 can be open or close-ended, and they are allowed leverage to the extent of 2x. And the maximum cap here is restricted to 10% in a single portfolio entity. This is basically the difference between Cat 1, Cat 2, and Cat 3. If I am to look at numbers or how the category shapes up against, say, mutual funds, PMS, these are the numbers. So if you look at mutual funds, almost 31 lakh crore in assets, PMS, 19 lakh crore, AIFs about 4.41 lakh crore, 4.42 in commitments. So it is represented in the graph as well. So if you see category wise, these are the commitments in Cat 1, Cat 2, and Cat 3 AIFs until December 2020. I think this is the date of which this data has been captured. So in Cat 1, 42,353 crores of investments, 3,52,000 crore roughly in Cat 2, and Cat 3 about 46,825 crores. These are on committed basis. So since AIFs have a drawdown period, this figure refers to the committed value by investors. So if I am to put that in numbers pertaining to growth CAGR over 5 years, so the way you've got to read this is the graph on the left-hand side top talks about the 5-year CAGR growth category wise. So if you see category 1, the commitments have grown 34%. For Cat 2, it's 85%. And for Cat 3, it's 59%. And AIF as a whole has been growing at a CAGR of 70% when it comes to the committed value. So clearly a lot of new AIFs are coming on the scene and they are in demand. So they are lapping up a fair chunk of the investor commitment. This is visible in this particular graph. If you move on to the graph on the right, it quantifies these commitments in value terms. These are in 1,000 crores. So typically funds raised versus investment made. So about 2,13,000 crores have been raised in AIF overall, out of which 1,84,000 crore has been deployed till now. So these are the numbers and they stack fairly well. If you are to read into this data, if you look at the graphs below, let me start with the Cat 1 commitments graph on the left-hand side. You will see the breakup of where has this money come. This information is available for Cat 1 and hence I'm sharing. It gives you a flavor of, where is the pull coming from. So clearly you can see, 64% of the commitments are in the VC category, the venture capital category, which has by far seen the biggest pull. SME remains fairly low at 28. Social venture, basically not-for-profit philanthropic investments have seen a very, very large allocation in 37%, greater than SME. And infra has seen a small 11%, but it has now been growing fairly well. So expect this infra category to swell, in the near future. The fund raised again shows same picture. So, venture capital has seen bulk of the fundraisers at about 62%. Social venture not too bad at all at 39, where SME is showing a degrowth. So basically not an area of choice for investors because of the volatility that has persisted over the last, a couple of years in the SME segment. Infra, like I said, is seeing a renewed focus. So, a fairly large, amount of fund raised in this category of late. Even in the investments made, you can see these similar, similar percentages. So you very clearly able to distinguish what opportunities are seeing more interest from investors and fund managers alike. So some key takeaway from what we've seen till now. Some of the areas where AIFs provide you with benefits is basically access to multiple strategies. So unlike the conventional investment options in mutual fund or stock investment or debt investment, where you have to typically choose within the same basket of product, AIFs can have multiple ways to take exposure into each one of these. So debt could be real estate debt, it could be SME lending, it could be government bonds and portfolio basket, it could be anything. Equities could mean unlisted, listed. Within unlisted, it could mean startups or venture capital. It could mean social ventures and all of that. So basically, if there is a strategy which you think you want to take exposure into and it is not available in the conventional space, or at least no information about it is available, you are likely to find it in the AIF space. And that's how it gives you access to multiple strategies. Flexibility, simply put, you have, since AIFs are basically targeted at experienced investors. So investors who know the risks associated with investing in multiple assets, multiple strategies, and are able to safeguard their own interest by doing a deep study into what they are getting into. And hence the entry barrier for such investments have been kept high at about 1 crore. But it also takes care of the flexibility by allowing a drawdown period. So it is one of the only products in the industry which allows for a drawdown structure, which simply means one can commit a much larger amount for investment, but start with tranches as demanded by the fund manager over a period of time prescribed in the offer document. They also provide you the ability to take leverage, which is a good thing when things go in your favor, and it can turn against you when a call goes wrong. And hence, while it is a flexibility, it is really up to the skill of the fund manager to make it into a plus and not a minus. They also have very focused strategies. So unlike the vast array of investments in say the stock market, where you have to choose your own stocks or create your own basket, here typically you will have very reputed fund managers creating focus strategies. So somebody can come and create a small and micro cap strategy where you can take exposure to that strategy. The fund manager would probably be well poised to pick up great buys in the entire segment and can give you both diversification and also benefit of a broader run up in the segment itself. Now, one way where this flexibility comes into good use here is if you take the example of a mutual fund. Say a mutual fund which is say 3,000 crore in AUM. If that fund decides to invest in a micro cap, which is 500 to 1,000 crore in market cap, uh, it may not be able to do so without owning a fairly large chunk of that company, and hence that stock will become illiquid for this mutual fund. And hence it makes sense to get into such strategies through an AIF structure. The fund size is small, the number of investors are smaller, and they are able to not just take these exposures but hold on to them even on the way up, because the single instrument exposure is fairly high, from 10 to 25%, and hence that flexibility comes into use here. The minimum investment cap for AIF, like I said, is 1 crore. In case of angel funds, it's 25 lakh. and the maximum number of investors are 1,000, and that's 200 in the angel fund as discussed. Hence, it also creates an environment where like-minded investors come together and invest in a scheme, which is usually a time-bound fundraise. So that becomes, a plus for what the investors look at. A short comparison between AIF, MF, and PMS. Very self-explanatory. Both AIF and MF are through the pooled route, whereas PMS is non-pooled. It's in individual DMATs. There is a clear distinction, differentiation in the minimum ticket size. When it comes to MF, it's more a mass product for all investors. It encourages new investors to join, since the entry barrier is just 500 rupees. PMS, the minimum ticket becomes 50 lakhs to only attract investors with, more experience and who are able to allocate, meaningful sums for a higher risk appetite that they enjoy. The same, in AIF is 1 crore as previously discussed. MF is categorized as per SEBI circular, and PMS can be discretionary or non-discretionary depending on what the client wants, and AIF categories have been discussed. In both MF and PMS, you do not have the option to leverage, but in AIF, Cat 3, you can leverage 2x on the amount invested. Some more comparison, customization in both MF and AIF is not possible. However, AIF usually customizes on the basis of the schemes it rolls out. So one AIF provider can have multiple schemes which are customized individually, much like the categorization of MF. PMS, of course, it is possible to customize. One more aspect in AIF which you must be aware of: it is the only category of product which requires the fund manager or the company to have skin in the game. So if you run a Cat 1 or 2 AIF, you are to contribute 2.5% or 5 crore, whichever is lesser, into your own fund. Similarly, if you decide to run a Cat 3 AIF, you will have to invest 5% or 10 crore, whichever is lower. This basically brings skin in the game. It reassures the investor that the fund manager is willing to put his money on his own ability and his company's ability to manage it for them. So basically, if we look at it as a whole, it combines the flexibility of PMS and the operational ease of a mutual fund, since it's a pooled investment, so no tight constraints, and you can operate it in one single account, unlike a PMS. So as an investor, it's very important to consider these while you're investing in AIF. So the strategy. It is very important to identify not all AIFs are same. They have multiple strategies which they cater to. Some of them are riskier than the others. Example, there is a category of investment under AIF which is called long short, which also can create losses. It does fairly well in a volatile environment, but still has higher risk because it takes exposure to options. Um, uh, so one has to be very careful. Sometimes, investment in debt can be construed as safe, but if you're investing in real estate, the risk is very distinct. It has to be looked at very differently from a regular debt in a mutual fund product. Hence, whenever you're choosing a strategy in AIF, you have to be very mindful that each strategy is crafted to serve a specific purpose, and it is probably suitable to a certain type of investors, and hence it's not a one size fits all. So must consider and go through the strategy of the AIF in detail before committing to it. Costs can also be a deterrent, although the sector it caters to is one which is aware of what it takes to invest into an AIF, but still, in the absence of any limits defined, like in mutual fund, you have a total expense ratio defined. In PMS, there are some caps as well. In AIF, you can charge, as per your structuring. Of course, in order to be competitive, you have to benchmark it to what is available in the market. But in short, you can structure it anyway. When I say you, it means the fund management company or the fund manager decides how they want to charge an investor. It could be a fixed charge. It could be, a fixed charge plus, profit share. It could be only profit share. It could be a high watermark kind of a structure. All of these are followed, and depending on which fund manager or depending on which company you invest with, these structures may differ. One thing is for sure, these costs are higher than investing in mutual funds or buying stocks on your own. Taxation we've spoken of. Uh, Only thing I would like to point is, in certain cases, in certain AIFs, you end up paying tax as an investor, even if the AIF, pays you out only a part of those profits. I'll give you an example. If you have invested in a debt fund, and the fund receives, say, 5 lakh rupees as interest, it distributes only 3 lakhs to you and retains the 2 for further investment. You will have to pay tax on the remainder 2 also. So sometimes, uh, taxation, depending on the underlying security in AIF, could be higher than your individual tax rate. It is very rare, but it can happen. Some of the prominent names, and some of these I saw as speakers also, not in this slide, but later. So on the venture capital side, you have Oreos, Zodius, Bloom Ventures, K Capital, Infra, Piramal, L&T, Edelweiss. In Cat 2, very, very renowned, well-known names, uh, private equity, IPO, pre-IPO, structured credit. And in Cat 3, some of the big names, some very remarkable performances as well. So, I will, for the sake of everyone on this call, I will take you through some of the questions which I've preempted. These are typically common for most people. So the first one being, why invest in closed-ended AIFs when there are open-ended avenues like MFPMS? So usually, from a wealth manager perspective, uh, whether you invest in a closed-ended or an open-ended structure is more incidental to your strategy. So the more appropriate thing here to do is select an asset allocation strategy, see if the AIF is a fitment in that strategy, see if it fits your risk appetite and your timelines and your requirements for liquidity. And if it ticks all those boxes, and it is something which your wealth advisor also recommends, then I think closed-ended or open-ended is just a matter of whether it fits your investment profile or not. It has no bearing on any other aspect of investment. How much of one's portfolio should one invest in AIF? This gets asked fairly regularly, and there is no answer to this except that please follow asset allocation guidelines at all time. If you're investing in a particular asset class, and you're not going above the prescribed limit, in discussion either with your wealth advisor or as per your own plan, then it is okay. to top up and buy new AIFs. Always be guided by the basic principles of investment, which is asset allocation and liquidity analysis. So that also becomes a key. Which are the AIF product categories should one consider at this juncture? Um, so this question, gets asked all the time, and the answer to this is slightly tricky. Um, I would say no two investors are alike. So this category was made to be specific, and it was made to be bespoke for people who want to consider the underlying investment. So this is not a one size fits all category of product. Hence, to different investors, different strategies and categories would appeal. You must have a fairly detailed chat with your wealth advisor, investment advisor, to figure out what suits you more. It will depend on your risk appetite, your time horizon, liquidity requirements, and hence there is no specific category for recommendation. It really depends upon who you are as an investor. Taxation gets asked often. I've already discussed it with you. How it is different from MF and PMS. MF gets taxed on the value comparison on the date of investment and redemption in case of equity. And in case of debt, it depends on the income that it generates from the time you invest to the time you redeem. It may be in the form of dividend or capital gains. So debt MF follow debt taxation, equity MF follow equity taxation. PMS follows taxation advice as per the trading of underlying securities in your own demat, whereas AIF are mostly pass through. So Cat 1, Cat 2 pass through in your hands. They are clubbed to your income once you receive it. And Cat 3 follows the taxation of the underlying security, whatever it is. Lastly, are there any risks associated with investments in AIF? The answer is, of course, yes. AIF is just a vehicle. The underlying investments are subject to the exact same risk, or in some cases, even more riskier because of their non-availability in public domain or easy trade in the public domain. Hence, you should ascertain the risks of investing in any particular AIF at any given point in time very, very carefully. It should not be construed as all AIFs have the same risk appetite. No. Some AIFs are inherently more risky than the others, and hence special attention should be given to ascertaining your own risk appetite and correlating it to the ones that exist in the AIF. I would very strongly recommend, encourage investors to have discussions with their advisors before taking a call on any AIF. So, with that, I conclude my part of the session. I would be very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Yeah, Rahul, are you done with the?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Guys, if you have any questions, please post. Just a sec. Okay, Rahul, the first question for you. Given the long gestation period of closed-ended AIFs, category 1 and 2, when does one typically start monitoring performance of an AIF? Or in other words, after how many years does a performance metric of AIF really useful?
Sure. So, good question. I would say it really depends on the underlying asset. Same rules apply as the underlying asset. So, if you consider investing in a debt option in a mutual fund, you usually tend to look at a 3-year time horizon, uh, when you invest. The same benchmark should be kept for an AIF, which is investing in debt. If you look at an equity investment option, say a listed equity, then again you should consider that the equity cycle is typically long. Uh, an equity investor should always keep a 3 to 5 year horizon in mind whenever they consider investing in equities. However, having said which, you must regularly track the performance of your AIF, because nobody commits a back-ended or front-ended performance. It is with a view that there will be a growth over a period of your investment, and hence it is important to keep a tab on all your AIF investments. I think there's a quarterly report that you receive. You must read through it, and it is always good to keep a tab on how your investments are performing. I hope I've been able to answer that.
Uh, so the next question, the benchmarking guidelines which SEBI came out with recently, is it applicable now? Where can we see
Um,
such benchmarking disclosure as an investor?
yeah. So I think it's under development. There is no benchmarking readily available. I think the industry is developing it, and I think they will come out with a solution soon. Because unlike mutual funds, which have been defined by SEBI, the classification, and there exists multiple benchmarks for them to be tracked. AIF, the same AIF can be investing across all market caps by definition, and hence it is very difficult to benchmark it to an existing, benchmark. We will need to create uh, benchmarks for AIF as an industry. Ones which follow a pattern may be sort of quick to adapt a benchmark, but ones where there is no fixed pattern, we might have to develop new benchmarks.
Uh, okay, the next question for you. Do you think AIF would be available to small ticket size investors in the near future, like mutual fund or retail investor with a slightly higher risk profile?
So, considering how SEBI has moved on PMS, where the minimum ticket has been going up, I do not foresee reduction in AIF subscription anytime soon. I think the category is still new. It takes a fair bit of skill to identify this category, and the regulator would like to protect the interest of smaller investors at this point in time who are not all that experienced in investing. So the answer is I do not see this happening anytime soon.
In next question, Rahul, in your experience handling, family offices, where do you see more inclination as far as family offices is concerned in terms of AIF categories? Cat 1, Cat 2, or Cat 3?
So, frankly, family offices are not fixated on the idea of AIF alone. They are really agnostic to the vehicle as long as you can get across a great idea. But again, there is a very, very strict adherence to asset allocation in most family offices. And hence, when they consider one asset class, say debt, they would like to weigh all options that are available currently in the debt, which may include AIFs as well. Having said that, even if you look at equity, at any given point in time, you will have multiple options, vehicles of investment into equity, which may include AIF. The reason why AIF are gaining popularity amongst family offices, they find significance in being able to invest with similar minded investors and not being subjected to the pitfalls of mass redemption or also over diversification. So I would say AIF becomes a product of choice because of the differentiation, and the ultimate decision is basis the allocation and the investment strategy.
Right. Moving on to the next question. Okay, so audience, I see some questions which are more apt for a lawyer or a fund manager, so I'm skipping those. If you feel there's some questions which are more suited for someone like Rahul, please post. We have another 5 minutes to go for the session to end. Rahul, any particular sectors where you're seeing a lot of interest from HNI families and family office?
So, the usual uh, suspects of infra, pharma, they're gaining pace. A lot of demand is coming in to see AIFs that are investing into great infra stories of the future. Pharma is seeing a lot of push as well from the investor community. So these are the two stories that are playing out well. On the debt side, we're seeing more and more demand for high yield assets, yet highly rated. So there are two different school of thoughts there. The obvious answer is that yields come with risk, but given the happenings in the market over the last couple of years, most investors are turning a little risk averse when it comes to debt, and hence they look at great quality that comes with a fairly decent yield.
So other than AIFs, are there any other alternative asset classes where you're seeing a lot of traction?
I think it's a pretty standardized list, and when the markets are good, like they have been in the recent times, people tend to look at multiple options. So we are seeing a lot happening in the unlisted space. I'm sure all of you read the valuation stories in the papers every day, and that is emerging as a very strong theme. Even without the AIF structure, there is a lot of demand for investing in the unlisted space at the moment.
Sure. So audience, any more questions? Yeah, just a sec. What is the level of transparency in cost structures by AIFs? Rahul?
So you're free to choose an AIF basis their declaration on the charging structure, and of course the AIF is bound to show utmost transparency in the way they are charging you as against what they made you sign in the commitment sheet, and that holds good. So you will see a complete statement breakdown of all costs charged to you fairly transparently, and it is up to you to choose a cost structure or not.
Super. So I believe that's about it. Just last question. Yeah. Uh, on which category is the maximum inquiry coming from investors? Is it in search of something new or is it diversification? What are your process to onboard a client to know that they are AIF investing ready?
Okay. So, like I mentioned in my talk, AIF is just a vehicle. You have to be ready to invest in the underlying security. So, AIF in itself is not the investment asset. It is either equity or debt or private equity or venture capital or any of that. So, I think you must have the time horizon. You must have the risk appetite, and you must have the ability to not have liquidity for the lock-in period of the fund. I think that's a primary qualification. As respect to the first part of your question, which category or which theme is in demand? Um, I would say, it keeps changing. The market is dynamic, and there are themes which do well. And as soon as a particular segment does well, we usually see interest in investors to check if there is a AIF that caters to that segment of growth. But in today's times, the market cycles have shortened considerably. Hence, uh, you should only choose sustainable growth stories to create an AIF. Otherwise, for all in a short period of 3 to 6 months, the growth story is out, and you're sitting on a portfolio that does not do well for you going further. So it's tricky. Best left up to the fund managers to decide, and for us to choose as investors what we want to commit.